Coast. Their dog stood frozen over the baby's face for 20 minutes. They thought he had become dangerous. It was the only reason their baby is alive. Everything looked normal the morning it began. That is the part that made it so hard to understand later. Coast. Juniper was 7 months old. She had been sleeping in a nursery for 3 weeks, a transition that had required more negotiation from her parents than from her. She was the kind of baby people describe as settled, which is to say she cried when she had reason to and stopped when the reason resolved. Coast. Her parents, Sebastian and Amara Kowalski, had started to trust the rhythm of her, which is perhaps why neither of them had a word for what they observed on the Thursday morning that started all of it. Coast. Their Bernese Mountain Dog named Clover was 84 pounds and 2 years old. She had been introduced to Juniper the day they brought the baby home. In the careful way the dog trainers recommend, gradual and supervised, with the baby's blanket presented to the dog first. So the scent arrived before the person. Coast. Clover had been interested and then unremarkable, which was the ideal outcome. She slept outside the nursery door in the way large dogs sometimes choose a post without being directed to it. Coast. On Thursday, she was inside the nursery when Amara arrived to get Juniper for the morning feed. Clover was standing over the crib, both front paws on the floor, her large head positioned directly above the baby's face, utterly still. Coast. Juniper was awake, wide-eyed, looking up at the dog with the expression of an infant confronting something much larger than itself. Amara said the dog's name sharply. Clover did not move. She lifted Clover away by the collar. The dog went without resistance, stood at the doorway and came directly back. Coast. Sebastian came in when he heard the tone in Amara's voice. He was an electrician, 12 years in residential work, methodical, unshakable. He watched Clover for 30 seconds and then said we should talk about this. Coast. They talked. They consulted what they knew. Clover was not growling, not stiff, not demonstrating anything that looked like aggression on any visible axis. But the fixation was something neither of them had a framework for. Coast. She stood over the baby's face with an attention so complete it looked from the outside like intensity without purpose, which in a large dog positioned over an infant was not something they could leave unexamined. Coast. If you stay for stories about what animals sense before we do, you are in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Coast. By Saturday, it had happened 4 more times. Always near the baby, always that motionless positioning, nose low, inhaling, the eyes alert in a way that wasn't watchful. It was specifically reading the air around Juniper's face. Coast. Amara's mother said it was beautiful. Sebastian's collie told him, without being asked, that a dog that size standing over a baby was not a situation to normalize. Coast. The pediatrician said to monitor it and separate them if it recurred during unsupervised periods. The internet provided 11 different opinions that contradicted each other. By Sunday morning, they had decided Clover would stay in the backyard during the day, just for now. Coast. Sunday evening was when the headache started. Not Amara, not Sebastian. Amara's sister, who was visiting, who came downstairs at 7 in the evening, pressing her fingers to her temples, and saying she felt strange, that she had felt strange since arriving, that the house felt different somehow. Coast. Sebastian went to the basement utility room. Coast. The heat exchanger on the furnace had a crack along the primary seam. A crack that had been there for, his best estimate, somewhere between 10 days and 2 weeks, sufficient to allow combustion byproducts to migrate into the living space at low concentrations. Not detectable by smell. Coast. Not triggering the carbon monoxide alarm, which required a threshold his best estimate suggested had not yet been reached. Sufficient over-prolonged exposure in a sealed house in winter with windows closed to accumulate in low-lying air. Coast. In a room with an infant who spent the majority of her hours in the space closest to the floor. Sebastian called the gas company and then opened every window in the house. Coast. The technician who arrived, a man named Dale Fortescue with 20 years in residential HVAC, said the readings in the nursery were 14 parts per million. Safe threshold is 35 parts per million for adult occupants. Coast. For an infant at floor level, the calculation is different. For an infant who spent most of her waking and sleeping hours within 2 feet of the floor, with developing neurological tissue and a respiratory rate twice that of an adult, the conversation changes. Coast. He said this room would have been a different story in another week. Has your dog ever done something that looked alarming until you understood what it was responding to? Tell us in the comments. These stories deserve to be heard. Coast. Clover had been positioning herself over Juniper's face because she was reading the air at the level where the baby breathed. Carbon monoxide, even at sub-alarm concentrations, shifts the atmospheric chemistry a dog's olfactory system registers. Coast. Clover had no training for gas detection. What she had was a nose capable of identifying change in a chemical environment that 4 humans in the same house were breathing without awareness. Coast. She had been standing over the baby for 5 days. She'd been standing over the only face in the house that was at the level where the accumulation was highest. She had been inhaling that air over and over because she was trying to read how much worse it had become. Coast. The furnace was repaired on Monday. New carbon monoxide detectors went into every room on Tuesday. Clover came back inside on Wednesday morning. She walked through the door at her usual pace, went to the nursery, circled once, and lay down on the rug beside the crib. Coast. Every guardian deserves to be recognized, even the ones who never ask for anything in return. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. Coast. Amara sat on the floor of the nursery that evening with Juniper on her lap and Clover beside her, and did not say anything for a long time. She thought about what the dog had been trying to read. She thought about what the air in this room had tasted like for 5 days to a nose 400 times more sensitive than her own. Ghost? She thought about Sunday morning when they put Clover in the backyard. The decision that felt responsible. The crack in the seam that kept producing what it had been producing. Clover lay on the rug with her chin on the floor and her eyes tracking Juniper the way she had been tracking her all along. Coast. Some sentinels do not announce themselves. Some of the most important warnings look, from the outside, like a problem you are solving by removing the warning. What happened the following winter when the new neighbors installed a generator, and what Clover detected on the second night it ran, is the story coming after this one.